We have earlier seen that design research produces many different kinds of knowledge. In this presentation, we will more systematically discuss what knowledge types exist, and we will identify the knowledge types based on the goal or purposes of knowledge, for what we can use knowledge. We'll take a broad view of knowledge, as in this definition from Wikipedia. So knowledge is a familiarity with something. It can be both theoretical and practical. And it can be explicit, for example, when you understand a scientific theory, but it can also be implicit, for example, being able to ride a bike or to tie your shoelaces. We will introduce a number of knowledge types based on the purpose of the knowledge, that is, how it is intended to be used. We will start with definitional and descriptive knowledge, move on to explanatory and predictive knowledge, and finally to prescriptive knowledge. Definitional knowledge is conceptual and structural knowledge. For example, definitions, concepts, terminologies, and classifications. Definitional knowledge doesn't tell anything about reality. It doesn't say whether certain statements are true or not. It only specifies the meanings of different words and how words and concepts are related to each other. One example is this one. A unicorn is a horse with a single horn on its forehead. This only says what should be meant by the word unicorn. It doesn't say that there really are any unicorns. Similarly, the second definition here only states what is meant by the phrase right triangle. You can also link a wide range of definitions into a classification system, such as the Linnean classification of plants or animals. All of this is definitional knowledge. Descriptive knowledge is knowledge that describes and analyzes existing phenomena. In contrast to definitional knowledge, descriptive knowledge actually makes claims about reality. It's about making true statements. These can be general statements, for example, that all swans are white, or that all large companies use information systems. There may also be more specific claims, for example, that the Eiffel Tower is 300 meters high, or that 2/3 of the Earth's surface is covered by water. Definitional knowledge is timeless. It holds for any time. Descriptive knowledge is about the present or the past. It describes what is or has been the case. But there's also knowledge that talks about the future, that makes predictions about it. Predictive knowledge. To start to understand predictive knowledge, Ignaz Semmelweis provides a good case. He studied childbed fever in the middle of the 19th century in Vienna. His work laid the foundation for the modern view of sanitation and its role in controlling infection and disease. Please have a look at this video, which describes Semmelweis and his work. One surprising fact is that Semmelweis could propose improvements that saved many lives, although he didn't understand the underlying mechanisms behind the spreading of childbed fever. Semmelweis produced knowledge that was very useful and valuable. He understood that if the doctors first washed their hands, then the risk for childbed fever was reduced. But he didn't understand why. He had developed predictive knowledge that can predict events, but not explain them. It doesn't offer any causal connection for understanding why events occur. The predictive knowledge seeks only predictions, not understanding. So, Semmelweis concluded if doctors wash their hands after autopsies and before they move to the maternity ward, then the risk for childbed fever is reduced. This is important knowledge, but it still feels incomplete in some way because it doesn't explain. But there is knowledge that is both explanatory and predictive. Such knowledge can both predict events and explain them by means of causation. It demonstrates the underlying mechanisms that influence the situation and leads to certain events. This type of knowledge aims to both explanation and prediction. In the case of Semmelweis, people later on learned why unwashed hands increase the risk for childbed fever. Microorganisms can adhere to dirty hands and be transmitted to other patients where they cause infections. This knowledge of microorganisms provides an understanding of why dirt on your hands can cause diseases. At the same time, this knowledge is predictive. So, some knowledge is only predictive, while other knowledge is both explanatory and predictive. And of course, there is also knowledge that is solely explanatory. Such knowledge can explain events once they have occurred by giving their underlying causes. This knowledge is aimed solely at understanding, not prediction. An example of this explanatory knowledge is that earthquakes are caused by shifts in the tectonic plates that make up the crust of the Earth. That knowledge cannot be used to precisely predict future earthquakes, at least not for now. But it can explain what caused a given earthquake by pointing to specific shifts in the tectonic plates. Here is a simple exercise. Try to take a column for each row before going on to the next slide. And here is a solution. Returning to Semmelweis, he developed predictive knowledge. He could predict what increased the risk of childbed fever. But he did more. He also ordered the doctors to wash their hands. He gave a special procedure for this. And this is also a kind of knowledge. But it doesn't seem to be any of the types of knowledge we have looked at so far. That knowledge doesn't define words, it doesn't describe reality, it doesn't predict, nor does it explain. So, what is this kind of knowledge? Try to answer the question while the next video plays. It goes into more detail on how to wash your hands. And what kind of knowledge does that video illustrate? Please play the entire video, even if it may feel a little silly. This video showed how you should go about washing your hands so they really become clean. Such knowledge is often called prescriptive. It's knowledge that helps people to systematically tackle and solve practical problems. Prescriptive knowledge prescribes how things should be done. It says that you should perform certain tasks in a particular way because then you can better achieve your goals, solve your problems. Often, this is done in the form of models and methods. And a couple of examples are a procedure for washing the hands and a method for developing mobile apps. This concludes the presentation. We have looked at 6 different types of knowledge. Definitional knowledge for defining words and concepts, descriptive knowledge for describing the world, predictive knowledge for predicting the future, explanatory and predictive knowledge for both explaining and predicting, explanatory knowledge for explaining by means of cause and effect relationships, and finally, prescriptive knowledge for addressing practical problems.